Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 190 for Monday, April 25th, 2022. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny, but you may know him better as Tarnished Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello. I may have been playing some Elden Ring, and you can hear a bit about my experiences with Elden Ring if you listen to this week's Render Distance. You can also hear Joel talking about his experiences with the Elgato Stream Deck, and that's at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where you can sign up to join our patron community, support the show, and get the extended conversation in the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast. We've also just had the monthly Minecraft Hangout for April, where we discussed a whole range of builds from folks in our community, from modern interiors and castle exteriors to map art and note block songs. Really fascinating discussion and super cool to see what everybody has been working on. That should soon be appearing on the patrons only RSS feed, which already has the quarterly hangouts, which we had the previous weekend, where we discussed the behind the scenes stuff for the podcast. So it's all go here in Spawn Chunks land.
Yes, I should be publishing the hangout just before publishing this episode of the show, so they'll be coming out in order.
It's all going to be queued up. So what's been happening on the Citadel this week? How you doing with West Hill and everything?
This has been a pretty low-key week as far as West Hill goes. I have been doing the lean-back, thoughtful, foundation-placing, roof-line making process of planning out the next area, which is the west side of West Hill, which never ceases to be redundant when you're typing it out on social media.
West Hill, yeah.
West Hill. I've even thought about calling this area West Ridge because there's a ridge that has a very steep slope down to the river, which you can see in one of the overhead shots I'm sharing with our live audience. And the road itself is actually quite steep. It goes from high up near the front north of the town all the way down to the south part at the docks. And it took a while to kind of figure out like how I wanted this to look. It's been laying empty for a while because I couldn't think about what style of builds and how I wanted to approach this because I'm trying to train my brain. We were talking a little bit in the pre-show about like inspiration for Minecraft and like time and history. And I'm trying to figure out how to make this look like the newer part of town and also the kind of fancier, maybe more money sort of town. Like, so if you're the mayor or the magistrate, or if you're a wealthy family, like this is the part of town you live in. Low Town was like the fishing village and like the really kind of poor area. The rest of the town is kind of like basic functional, but everything is kind of meant to look like it's been around for a while. So I'm going to try to use like less cracked brick. I'm going to use less stone brick if I can. I get to change my materials. There's going to be more calcite. I'm already got some temporary like dark prismarine for roofs and things. I'm looking forward to using some copper for the first time in builds. So I'm trying to expand kind of that kind of plan. But right now there's just an awful lot of spruce and diorite and granite and cobblestone because they're easy to differentiate on the map that I use, the map mod. And it helps when you're like looking at two buildings to like realize, well, where does this wall end and where does the new wall begin? That kind of stuff. And that also has brought in some lessons. And like I've been packing these really close together, similar to how I was doing the other parts of the city. And I'm having to like dial myself back again and say like, no. This is a fancier part of town. So this dirt path that's a block wide or whatever that's going to be around the side of this house is probably going to be paved or cobblestoned or stone bricked. And it's probably going to be at least 2 blocks wide, if not 3. And the tricky part there is that in Minecraft, 3 blocks wide looks like a road, 2 block wide look like a path, right? Like there's a huge difference. And so I ended up putting in a couple of like proper streets that are like 5 and 6 blocks wide going up into the woods because I'm trying to roll with the landscape in this entire town, and there's a high point where I've got like a scaffolding tower, which I think I've mentioned this before. I'm sure you've mentioned this before on the show too, but like talk about a quick way to map out roof height. Just use scaffolding.
Yeah. Scaffolding is so useful for stuff like that. Yeah. So I've got a tower in the distance that's going to be cool, and the tower itself is not going to be just its own thing. I feel like it's going to be on top of or part of a larger house, it's going to be like one of the things that this house kind of like sticks above the tree line. And
realizing that if that's got a fancy house, then a walking path up to that is not going to cut it. It's going to need something wide enough for like a horse and a buggy or something. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got some more roads coming in. It took a long time to work out like the spiral of the road. I right now I think in the screenshots it's all blocks, but eventually I've got the road down to all slabs, and that took a while. So there was a lot of like counting with Joel on Twitch and stuff like that. But it's come together, and it was a fun thing to share with the Twitch audience because I get to talk about like why I'm lowering this roof by a block, because it looked fine, but it like blocked a bunch of other things behind it. And it really helps when you're like putting in these particular frames, because you can quickly see, oh, when I walk around this curved road, I'm staring at this one build that's basically in like, we'll call it like the 12 o'clock position as you go around the curve, right at the bend of the curve. You're looking at that for almost all of the time that you're walking down the road. So that better be a really fancy, cool build. The build that is directly opposite of it, you hardly ever see.
Yeah.
So don't spend not hundreds of hours, but don't spend dozens of hours working on the build that's on the inside of the curve that you're just never going to look at. Or give it some sort of quirk, change its color, give it a tower, do something with that one on the inside that makes you look at it, so grabs more attention, but don't make it be too important. And so now I'm also thinking about the function and realizing I might have shot myself in the foot with some of these. I've packed a lot of these builds close together, and some of them I might end up combining into like being two houses become one, because I want to add purpose to them, like make a flower shop, make a shop or business or some sort of function on the ground floor with someone living upstairs. And to do that, I'm probably going to need to think about like, well, I want to design the interior first, rather than being like, oh, this is going to be a really cool pub, and I've got a 5x5 inside, which is really difficult to do anything with, right? So yeah. I might have to think a little bit more about the internal spaces.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of smart what you're saying though, with the houses kind of being on the inside of the curve. It makes sense because you've got like effectively a blind spot there, right? And you can either make it stand out or kind of have it blend into the background, and you're much more thinking about sculpting the way a player looks at that area as they're exploring, and it makes a lot of sense. I guess you're finding as well that if you get to the more expensive part of town, you were talking about the materials you were using like prismarine and copper and stuff like that. Do you find that it makes sense to your Minecraft brain that you're using materials which are more expensive in game terms, as well as the stuff that looks more expensive, because you're using less of the the cobblestone and the wood and the kind of stuff that comes very easily to Minecraft players that you're farming from kind of day one?
I guess so, and it's probably just happenstance that more colorful blocks in Minecraft are harder to get, right? Like prismarine, the turquoise, the warped wood. I mean, warped wood is not hard to get, but like it's higher up the chain if you look at everything from like, grass and stone and regular wood that you get in the overworld, compared to getting these more
exotic kind of woods. Yeah,
exotic. Thank you. Yeah.
Depending on your nether spawn, it can be very hard to get warped wood. Trust me.
Right.
I think a warped forest was probably the last nether biome I found in my current world. So it's really all about just happenstance and luck if you want to start building with that stuff early. So yeah, like it can be tough, and it's cool that you're now finding places for those to go in. And yeah, I totally see what you mean about wanting to give the people in that part of town a bit more space, because you think about, they want to buy a house that has, if not room for a garden, then at least a little bit of space around them, so that they can feel separated from their neighbors and feel more important as a result. But
and that's the lesson that I'm bringing in from working in Somerville for the last 3 weeks on Cosmic's Flower Farm, is that like I want more flowers, I want more color, like I really want to try to leave space. And there's a lot of places where I'm like, crap, I haven't really left much space in front of the house, between the house and the road, even for just like a couple of hedges that would make sense, So I need to try and remember to do that. And that's, again, it's why I'm doing these in wireframes, like taking even the really fancy important house on the bend of the road. If I need to push that back by a block, not the end of the world, it's not going to take that long. I could even test it quickly to see what it might look like. But gardens and having like little alleyways between the builds that connect to these little hidden areas that are like, 7x7 or 5x5 that just have like some plants and a bench or something. Like I'm looking forward to having stuff like that peppered throughout. Most of that is not planned out in these screenshots. Most of that is going to be in amongst the trees. Again, I'm trying not to cut down too many of the taiga biome trees because I quite like the way that it looks. And I feel like one of the things that kind of would indicate wealth or indicate, that kind of status in the town is like, I have enough wood. I have enough money to buy wood. I don't need to cut down this tree that's in my yard. I can leave it there because it's pretty, and not have to use it for function, But speaking of function, the one thing that I'm really looking forward to exploring is I decided to have the moat. I don't know where the water from the moat comes from for the keep, but I know where it's going. It's going to flow around the corner and go down a man-made kind of like almost like a gate, which you can see in some of the screenshots. And it then flows into a canal that goes underneath the wharf and out into the river. And I'm really looking forward to having like a little footbridge and having that be like an area that you can walk by and really kind of see what's going on. I don't know where the moat water is coming from. Maybe it's a natural spring or something. I don't know. But yeah, there's little touches like that I'm hoping to put in throughout that I think will be fun to kind of weasel in between the builds. I'm just trying to make sure that I've got enough room for it.
Yeah, sure. I think that's two of the things that people don't always take into account when they're city building in Minecraft as well, is that a lot of cities have both green space and water. And, especially in medieval times, if you're not close to a source of water, you've got to get your water from somewhere because people have to drink it. And so, like, either frequent wells or, some sort of path down to a nearby river, even, like, there's got people have to wash their clothes in cauldrons in their houses. There's different stuff you got to include there. So it's fun to work with that stuff, even though, as we've covered on the show before, it is tremendously time-consuming reshaping waterways in Minecraft to go the way you want them. It can be pretty satisfying as a result.
Yeah. The thing that I've noticed, too, with buildings being close together, like if you do that traditional thing with Minecraft, especially in medieval builds, where you've got the roof line or the roof of a build hanging over the edge of the actual floor of the foundation of the building by a block. If you don't put your buildings at least 3 blocks away from one another, the roofs are going to touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so like I think, 2 blocks is enough. And then I put it on the roof and I'm like, crap, they touch. Like, okay, well, I guess this is a closed off area. Like, again, I might even be trimming these buildings to be like taller and more narrow just to make sure that some sunlight hits the ground at some point. But yeah, anyway, what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
I've had a pretty technical week because I'm rebuilding my copper aging setup that I had on Empire's SMP. I'm building it mostly the same as it is before, so a flying machine with 9 blocks of copper attached to each side of it gets pushed down the room where all of these redstone circuits are, and whenever one goes over the top of an observer, the circuit detects that a block is there and pulls it out to one side or the other. And then there's an isolator circuit built into it so that it doesn't keep updating things as the rest of the blocks get pushed over there. But it's effectively like 9 circuits that are spaced 4 blocks apart so that when you throw all of the copper into it, all of the copper can age at the optimal rate, because copper ages best when it's not within 4 blocks of any other pieces of copper, because otherwise they all try and retain the same age and they'll age much slower. So I've been working on that, and it's been a lot of redstone components. I feel like I've used up my entire redstone supply twice over at this point and had to go and farm some more from clerics or go mining for it or anything like that. And tragically, I don't have the infrastructure for a witch farm or a raid farm or anything that would provide larger quantities of redstone, because I have to think of it in the context of the tutorial series I'm making, and I'm just not there yet. But overall, it's been a really fun project to work on. Again, I like making redstone gadgets like this prettier, and even though this one is quite repetitive and you can't really do much decoration in between, I've got the redstone on honeycomb blocks and blue terracotta, and I'm using magenta glazed terracotta to have arrows illustrating which way the flying machines go, and that kind of stuff. And it's all centered around a single walkway through the center of the room, or it will be once I've built that. But either side of that, there are these copper loading stations. So the room kind of fans out to the left and the right with all of the areas where the copper stays isolated. I'm planning on making a few changes and upgrades to the initial design for this, because I've been dabbling a bit more in a creative test world, and I have figured out a way, I think, of auto-detecting copper aging, which is one of the things that I was trying to do at first and gave up on it because I didn't quite want to... Like, I didn't want to spend a bunch more redstone components on it, and I also didn't want to deal with the problems that the auto-detection stuff throws up occasionally, like what if a copper block ages before it gets to the place where it's being held, which has happened when I've been placing these before. But I think I've gotten a way around those, or at least I can, problem solve as I go. And I know a bit more about redstone now that I'm willing to give this one a try. So I might be making some upgrades to it in the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, I've installed a blast furnace auto smelter there so I can get copper ingots pretty fast if I dig up some raw copper and bring it back there. And this is all underneath a dripstone cave where I've already built a dripstone-based lava farm. So all I have to do now is throw a bunch of lava buckets into a chest. They get automatically dropped down into the fuel input for the auto smelter, and blast furnaces just cook up all the copper for me.
So one of the nice things about using lava as a fuel source is that you don't have to worry about like redstone to evenly distribute the fuel, because the furnaces only ever take one bucket at a time.
Yeah, and it's like 6 buckets, maybe 7, because it consumes 1 if it starts cooking stuff already, and that's a hopper filled up. Like there's 1 in the fuel slot, 5 in the hopper. That's it. No worries about like I've got 3 stacks of coal in this one and only 1 stack of coal in that one. It's all pretty even across the board.
Yeah, that's one thing that I like and dislike about like using bamboo is that it just you can get it really quickly, but then like your furnaces don't always all smelt at the same time unless you really have a lot of redstone going on. I mean, dude, this looks fantastic. Like this must be so satisfying as knowing that you build your redstone stuff with as little kind of like tutorials as possible. Like you know the components. You might look up some ideas about how to use the components, but you want to design the farm yourself. And having this kind of an array, designing a slice, designing the function of a module, and then building 20, 30 of these modules in different directions. Like it's such a satisfying cascading layout. And the fact that you're using honeycomb blocks as well, which you don't see used a lot in builds because they're challenging to a point to work in, they work really well with the honey blocks. And they also just like they're not the same as a copper, because obviously the aged copper looks very different, but the original copper has got some echoes of the honeycomb block in there as well. And it's just fun to see that kind of block kind of used in this way, and it adds some color in Minecraft, which we don't normally we don't often see. Depending a lot of redstone builds are very like, because they often use so many blocks, they're usually the easiest blocks to get, stone, polished stone, iron. Sometimes if people have an iron farm, they just don't know they have more iron than they know what to do with. And because those blocks also have borders, it makes them easier to see what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is really cool, man.
Yeah, the color triangle I have going on of magenta, glazed terracotta, fully oxidized copper, and honeycomb blocks is I'm kind of getting all of the colors in there. I've got like a cyan, yellow, magenta kind of thing going on. But I think there's interesting combinations like that coming up, like throwing honeycomb blocks next to dark prismarine and blue terracotta and a bit of spruce wood has been really nice as well. And so I'm sort of starting to theme a few of these areas around that. I've got dark prismarine bringing the water down that's, transporting all of the lava buckets to the fuel inputs and stuff. So there's a few different materials, and I want it to feel colorful because the entire cave around it is all stone, dripstone, and granite. And so I want this to be like a splash of color in here, and we'll probably decorate it in slightly more muted colors so the machine itself actually stands out a little more. But yeah, that's a work in progress right now. I'm now able to get a lot more of the terracotta because I have some blue ice boat roads in the nether now, which take me to the nearest patch of Badlands, which is about 10,000 blocks away, diagonally. It's about 8,000 in one direction and then 6,000 in another. So that was really difficult to get to. It was just time-consuming to fly there, and now I'm able to do that in the nether, and I have a straightforward path that takes me there, all spawn-proofed, so I don't end up with piglins just stepping onto the track in front of me as I'm trying to, coast down this tunnel. And that was really time-consuming, but very rewarding, because the Badlands area I found is Badlands as far as the eye can see. Like if you stand in the center of it, there's maybe a couple of small patches of desert that are landlocked inside of all of the eroded Badlands and mesa terrain. So I'm very, very happy I found an area like that, because the first Badlands I found was basically one corner of a desert, and it was not very big. And so I thought, I'm going to need some more terracotta. So hopefully, that won't exhaust itself in any great hurry. And I think the last thing I'm going to do this week, I'm going to return to my Wither Skeleton farm, which I left as soon as I had 3 Wither Skeleton skulls, but I've already flattened out the areas of 3 crossroads in a nether fortress in a warped forest. So I'm getting absurdly high spawn rates from that. I'm probably just going to bring a piglin back there to get all of the Wither Skeletons out, maybe an iron golem to flush out all the magma cubes, and some turtle eggs for the zombie piglins, and then all I'll have left to worry about is the blazes in terms of what's spawning there and how frequently we can refresh the Wither Skeleton spawns. So as far as a lo-fi Wither Skeleton farm goes, I think it's going to be pretty productive.
Cool. With the iceboat roads, did you build those at right angles, or did you do a diagonal, like direct at the location?
It had to be straight roads. It was 2 straight roads. So you go you go like 950 blocks in the nether in one direction, then you do a sharp left turn and go 600 that way, because otherwise I mean, and it's not far. It's 1,500 blocks worth of tunnel. It's a 3x3, which took a little while, but then. Like, in terms of the diagonal stuff, it's so much harder getting diagonals right with boats, because you're always bumping off the corners, you lose all your momentum. It probably takes twice as much, if not 3 times as much ice. But the cool thing about with having straight roads and the size of the hitbox of a boat, you can space the ice blocks out 1 block apart, and it still coasts over the top of them. And then all you have to do is put slabs around the side to avoid spawning. I put buttons on top of all of the blue ice blocks so that they don't spawn anything either, because they are solid spawnable blocks. And then the road just goes on forever. And it probably saves me time doing it this way with 2 longer, straighter roads than doing 1 diagonal road and having to deal with all of the problems that throws in your face.
Yeah. Now, did you do anything with regards to like blocks with just the right hitbox sides coming in from the left and the right to kind of keep the boat aligned, or are you steering on the blocks and just staying on the straight and narrow?
I'm steering and hoping is most of the way it works. It's kind of you do drift quite a lot, but with it only having 1 block either side of it before the wall gets there, and the whole thing is like completely closed in terms of the walls. I've left a couple of gaps in the roof here and there, but nothing major. You still just kind of like you slide along the side of the wall instead of it slowing you down, and you don't end up falling off the ice at any point there. So I'm just about able to kind of speed myself down here and drift around a corner, and I slam into the wall, but obviously it's not doing me any damage, so it's not a huge problem.
Right.
The main problem right now is that as soon as I get to the end, I can't slow down in time. When I see the nether portal, I know I'm hitting the nether portal. And so as soon as the boat lands in there, I try and get out as quickly as possible, but then the boat's already gone through the nether portal and through to the other side. And so when I break it in the nether portal on the other side, the entity boat goes back through to the nether. But then that does mean it's kind of stored itself there for when I need to come back, so it's actually it's not too bad. As long as I don't have a full inventory at that stage, I'm good.
Is this faster than flying? Like, if you built a tunnel to fly through, can you fly just as fast as a boat, or is it faster?
It's faster. It's just a bit more fiddly, because you've got to make sure you've got a boat with you and, put the boat down, get in the boat, start rowing. Flying can be a little bit more hands-off. I mean, all you have to do is just move the mouse around a little bit and occasionally right-click. I think boats move faster. I'm pretty sure the flight speed of a light train is around, 30 blocks per second, and this is 72 blocks per second on blue ice and 40 per second on packed ice. So I think it's faster. It's just like a little bit more infrastructure that you have to put in place beforehand. And this is all up in the nether ceiling. It's not above the roof, but it's just below. It's at like Y110 in the nether. So it's actually pretty easy to get up there with a ladder or a minecart elevator. And I think the whole thing, I'm going to thank myself for it in the long run, because otherwise I'd be flying through open nether terrain with ghasts shooting at me and trying to memorize a route over to 1,000 blocks in whatever direction. I think it's easier this way, and ultimately it's going to be a lot more sensible to use it long term.
It's one of the things that we've skipped over on the Citadel with our fast travel command blocks because of the build zones and the long-term nature of the world.
Yeah.
And traveling 10,000 blocks, in the overworld in both directions, so like roughly 15 to 20,000 diagonally. Even in the Nether, that's not short. It's not terribly long, but it's not short. But we've just not had the need to do the tunnels because for us, it was just like, well, we'll just, for the sake of convenient and busy adults, we'll just do the fast travel thing. The idea at first was to create some sort of payment system so that the fast travel would take something valuable like diamonds or netherite or just something. And we just never bothered to install it.
Fair.
So yeah, we haven't really figured that out. But it means that there's some nether tunnels that we had for early game stuff. But like once we've started expanding into different areas, we don't really connect things up via the nether very often, which means that we miss out on like nether tunnel decoration opportunities, fast travel, cool boat things, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, very cool. I like the idea. It makes me want to just have one just for the sake of having one.
Yeah, they're fun. Like just going at that speed in Minecraft, especially if you've got like I installed coordinates HUD from Vanilla Tweaks just so I could see the coordinates while I was running around and not have the entire F3 debug screen on the screen. And I love watching the numbers go by that fast. Like, I would decorate this tunnel if I thought I was going to see any of the decorations, but short of doing like a Millennium Falcon going into hyperdrive, kind of like warp speed lines on the side of the tunnel kind of thing, I'm not really going to see most of the decoration in this. So I think it's going to stay primarily very functional, maybe a bit of signage to make sure I know which biome I'm going to. But aside from that, I don't think I'll need to decorate any of this stuff.
You need to do like one of those Beetlejuice tunnels, like just black and white, just kind of have it strobe by you and just blur everything. It's too bad that you need like Forza Horizon 5 sound effects on the boat. So instead of the rowing noises, you need like a
absolutely. Yeah, just having
some high performance sport boat.
Yeah, like a rally car engine kind of thing. Yeah.
There you go. Well, we should probably get into some news before we get carried away and talk about speedboats for the rest of the episode.
Yes, let's do it.
This week, we've got Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 22W16A/B. B was just a quick bug fix. There was a crash in A, so there's not a lot to talk about for B, so we'll be focusing on A. And in Snapshot 22W16A is a chance to relive the good old times appears in a ability to defragment a disc, a new music disc to be precise. This snapshot also comes with even more new music, tweaks to the LA, and on top of it all, some random gameplay and even some slightly more predictable things. In the new feature category, we have new music, and we have the Disc Fragment 5 and the Music Disc 5. For new music tracks, the new music tracks are called Ancestry, Airy, Firebugs, and Labyrinthine. I hope I'm saying that right. Airy, Firebugs, and Labyrinthine can be all play amongst other songs in lush caves and all types of swamps, forest, and jungles, as well as the main menu. Ancestry plays in the deep dark. Music Disc 5 by Samuel Oberg. Unlike other discs, it can only be obtained by finding and crafting 9 disc fragments together. These disc fragments can be found rarely in ancient city chests. Changes in 22W16A include tweaks to the LA, improved the predictability of a number of gameplay events. Frogs can now spawn on grass, mud, moss carpet, mangrove roots, and muddy mangrove roots. Frog lights are now movable by pistons. In the LA tweak category, the LA's health has been raised from 10 to 20. The delay after an item is thrown by an LA is lowered from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. Item search range was raised from 9 blocks to 32 blocks, mirroring changes we've seen recently in Bedrock. Movement and speed changes include that the LA is now slower when just wandering. The LA is now faster when collecting items going to the player or going to a note block. And the throw arc of the LA has been changed following community feedback. Predictability and randomized events. Some events are now more predictable and no longer have a possibility of extreme behaviors, such as placement and velocity of things dropped from droppers and dispensers, placement and velocity of items spawned from containers when destroyed, randomized follow_range component attribute for mobs, velocity of horses spawned from skeleton traps, blaze random position and randomized speed of blaze projectiles, randomized portion of damage and velocity arrows, randomized flight patterns of fireworks, and bobbing patterns and time until fish for fishing rods. Bobbing patterns meaning like the bobbing on the end of your fishing rod. Technical changes in 22W16A include the LWJGL library has been updated to version 3.3.1, added a heap memory allocation metric to the F3 debug screen, added do warden spawning game rule, and updates to paintings. Paintings are, placeable in survival and can now be controlled with painting_variant placeable tag. Added unused paintings from Bedrock Edition, Earth, Wind, Fire, and Water. These paintings are not placeable by default, but can be added through a data pack. Fixed bugs of note in 22W16A. Axolotl frogs, turtles, and striders couldn't pathfind through open doors. Allays don't drop their held items upon death. Allays can despawn after being given an item if they haven't picked any items up yet. Wardens can get angry at mobs outside the world border. Wardens can hear mobs beyond the world border. Wardens can spawn outside the world border. That doesn't seem fun. Wardens can spawn in very narrow places, causing them to suffocate. The full list of bugs, of course, is available from the snapshot changelog at minecraft.net, which will be linked in our show notes.
In Bedrock Edition news, Minecraft 1.18.30 released on Bedrock this week. So an actual full release as opposed to a beta. This one will just be downloaded whenever you load up the game next. The change summary includes an updated Create New World experience, which is gradually going to be rolled out to players starting from the day of its release. Worlds can now be created with 64-bit seeds for total seed parity with Java Edition. Many changes have been included to improve damage and hunger calculations. Under the experimental features toggle, you will still find things like the Deep Dark and the Warden, which were previously in beta versions. And the new Minecraft Bedrock rendering engine, Render Dragon, which we're familiar with from Windows version, is now live on Android, iOS, Switch, and Windows 10 x86 builds. This consolidates everything into the new graphics engine and allows Mojang to continue investing in future performance and stability improvements, as well as exciting new features. So, as far as gameplay changes and tweaks go, there are a whole bunch of them. We won't be listing absolutely everything here, but we're going to be focusing on the changes to parity. We're probably going to have a bit more of a discussion on that in future episodes here. But the gameplay changes as far as parity goes, they've tweaked the hunger depletion rate to better match Java Edition. Players now properly lose hunger when sprinting or swimming and lose significantly less hunger when jumping. Exhaustion rates can also be tweaked in behavior packs if you want to adjust any of those values behind the scenes. Shulkers now have a chance to spawn another shulker when hit by a shulker projectile, so we have the shulker breeding mechanics in the game now. Drowned can no longer spawn where the block light level is above 0, good news for rivers everywhere. Bees no longer become angry when beehives are destroyed by Silk Touch. Untamed wolves can now be leashed. Mobs can no longer spawn on top of campfires. The Ravager would now attack and target the Wandering Trader, and he deserves it. Mobs spawned from a dispenser are now persistent, and Netherbrick, Iron and Gold Nuggets, Red and Brown Mushroom Blocks, and Chorus Plant and Flower Blocks can no longer be used as fuel in furnaces. There are also some pretty significant changes to combat, especially when it comes to hunger and regen and that kind of stuff. They've improved the accuracy of damage calculations. They've fixed some issues where damage invulnerability wasn't being applied properly, and fixed an issue where the protection enchantments mitigated too much damage, which has now been changed to match Java Edition. They've also added in the armor toughness value permanently. We saw this in the beta previously, so diamond armor and netherite armor now have a toughness value of 2 and 3 respectively, and armor reduction calculations have been tweaked to account for toughness. So netherite armor will now reduce more damage than diorite armor. Lowering the amount of knockback resistance granted by netherite armor is also on the slate, along with punching now dealing less damage, which better matches Java Edition. I believe punching did a 2-point damage, like a 1 heart damage on Bedrock, which it now deals half a heart as per Java Edition. Damage is now calculated more accurately by properly calculating and storing partial damage for larger damage. Mobs across higher and lower difficulties have had their damage adjusted slightly accordingly. Mobs with knockback resistance, such as Ravagers or Zoglins, now receive less knockback when hit by an Iron Golem. The armor and protection reduction calculations have been made more accurate. Dragon's Breath now properly deals damage. Protection enchantments now properly work on most damage types, and landing on a stalagmite is now properly considered full damage. That is just the parity changes. Like I said, there is a huge changelog which includes more bug fixes, experimental features, and gameplay tweaks. We don't have time to read it all here on the show, but you can find it in our show notes, and that's once again linked over at minecraft.net.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I feel like as these snapshots get longer and longer bug fix lists, I feel like we're getting closer and closer to the wild update being a thing.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that so far we have not seen a couple of things that people have been suggesting would be in the wild update. Things like fireflies, which we know aren't frog food anymore, but we haven't heard anything about fireflies since then. And a lot of people are wondering, are birch forests going to get updated in this this update like they, showed the concept art for at Minecraft Live? My inclination is probably not, but I think we'll probably have some more discussions about that closer to release, just to give Mojang some time if they've still got some stuff they want to work on. Because clearly they've been working on some things. We have a new music disc, and obviously some of the, End City loot and stuff is being changed too, but you're right that along with like advancements being added in, we've got new music by Lena Raine, we got a new music disc. It feels more like we're in the polishing phase of features for this snapshot rather than being in we're still adding tons and tons of new features kind of phase.
And the new stuff that they're adding likely don't need tweaks. Like I don't see tweaks to Firebugs or tweaks to the song Firebugs. I don't see tweaks to the soundtrack or tweaks to a new music disc really needing to happen between now and release. Whereas what you are seeing are tweaks to the allay, tweaks to where frogs can spawn, that kind of thing. So not many new features, more like just tweaks to the existing features that are coming. Mm-hmm. Speaking of the frogs, I thought a quick note in question. Really cool that they're able to spawn on so many different things. Hopefully that'll make them appear more regularly in mangrove swamps for people. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the only mob that can spawn on carpet? On moss carpet? I mean,
I think so, right? I don't think anything else spawns on carpet because carpet does still have like a small change in block height, and typically stuff doesn't spawn when there is a change in block height. It's only on solid blocks. So yeah, that's an interesting catch. That's the first time we see a mob spawning on something that isn't a full solid block. So like you want to build a frog farm, moss carpet sections of a swamp, and nothing else can spawn there but frogs, right? Interesting idea. Yeah, I can see that working. You gotta spawn proof a lot of other terrain, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's assuming that moss carpet works the same way as like wool carpet does. I think it does, but
I'm pretty sure
I've only ever used it for decoration, right? I've never used it to spawn proof, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm using it to spawn proof in the area for my slime farm right now. The lid of the farm is covered in moss carpet, and I don't think I've ever seen anything spawn down there. There should be slimes all over the place. So yeah, that could be right. That could be right. Very interesting.
So as far as the other tweaks, I think the allay changes all make sense. I thought the changes that we shared about the Bedrock allay a week or two ago, I was just like, okay, well, I know that it's probably going to trickle down to Java because it makes sense to have like an increased range and speed things up when it's supposed to be fast and slow things down when it's supposed to be slow. The one thing that I think still needs a lot of work is the throw arc, as they're calling it. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem is in the name. The fact that it's an arc is part of the problem.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it has to be pixel perfect accuracy, but similar to the bug fix that they just made with really strange like outlier directions from droppers and dispensers, I think that the allay could have a similar dropper / dispenser sort of function where, yes, it's not going to be perfect, but like it misses half the time. In any animation or any clip that I've seen online of the allay throwing its item at the target, I think part of it is because the allay doesn't stop moving. Yeah. And so its momentum, when it throws stuff, it just kind of like carpet bombs as it goes. And I kind of feel like if it was something that was focused, then it might be at least more predictable. I'm not saying that it has to be on one specific block all the time, because I understand that there's some sort of like contraptions that the player's going to want to make. But if you could at least have it like fly up to a note block and throw it at the side of the note block and have it hit the note block and then drop in a predictable manner. So it's still going to look cool when a couple of allays come up to a note block and just start firing stuff. But like, at least your collection is going to be a little bit more predictable, because I don't want to have a 3x3 of hoppers or more to collect stuff from an allay, right?
Yeah, like having large pads of hoppers sort of seems to defeat the point in a way, because you'd want to use those hoppers to move stuff across the room instead of having the allay do it for you. It's interesting. Like there's going to be a bit of compromise, and as we've said before, I don't think they want to make the allay all powerful, but yeah, it may still be that it needs some work. And it seems like a lot of the changes to random events, like dispenser and dropper, item, push direction, that kind of thing, they've been refined. They've not just been made entirely uniform, but the extremity of those events has been dialed back a little bit, is the impression that I got. And so I think that may even have been as a result of them trying to change the way the allay throws stuff and make that a bit more accurate, is that, everything else was made more accurate in the process, which might mean that it's possible to do more with some of the other mechanics in the game. Like if you think about the extremes of direction that TNT gets when you dispense it, meaning that sometimes your contraptions blow up if they're not built right, or you don't have stuff to align the TNT. If you think about how difficult it is to hit the bullseye on a target block from a distance, not because you're bad at aiming, but because the arrow always has some random direction applied to it, I am kind of wondering what else is going to be slightly affected by that that's going to have long-term implications for the game.
Slice Lime has a great video out that he does whenever there's a new snapshot, but it really does a good job of explaining those like random gameplay behaviors that have been refined with visual kind of indications about what it is and what it used to be and what it is now. And it's very cool to see, like when you see the visual explanation, you go, okay, I get it. I understand what they've been refining. And I think it's going to help for people that do like a lot of really heavy, I don't want to say, I guess scientific stuff, like SciCraft, like that kind of use of droppers and the need for it to be precise and that kind of thing. I feel like those changes I think are going to help a lot of players that rely on the game to be, even if it's not predictably accurate, they need it to be at least be predictable within a range. And I think that knowing that range is a little bit tighter, I think is good.
Yeah. We're going to save most of our discussion of the music discs for the main discussion. I have a lot of thoughts about like lore implications and stuff, but I feel like we may as well tie that in with our thoughts on Lena Raine's music and
Sure.
the music disc experience. So let's keep it focused on what else is left. Paintings. They've added 4 new paintings to Java that were previously available in Bedrock Edition, but they haven't put them in Survival. They've effectively left them behind a data pack kind of wall because they're not really intended to be in the survival game for the most part. I know there's been a lot of discourse in the community lately about paintings and wanting more of them. Personally, the thing that bothers me the most about paintings is that, with the exception of the ones that are 1 block wide, they're all even numbers. And since we default to odd numbers so frequently in building, it becomes really difficult to find a painting that fits in a house without it being like slightly off to one side or the other, especially in a smaller room. Like, how often do you end up using paintings in Minecraft? And do you think you'd use the other ones more?
The only paintings I've used is a custom texture pack, because I took some of my friends' paintings and turned them into pixel art and put them on the painting files, because she does kind of some abstract or very impressionistic stuff. So when it was reduced to pixel form, it really kind of works, in terms of jiving with Minecraft. It works more like a color experience than it does a real rendered image.
Yeah.
At that resolution. And I've always thought paintings were, for the lack of a better word, dumb. Like I find that they're memey, and I felt like they were kind of added as a joke. I never really understood. Like, there might be 1 or 2 that are probably suitable for putting up in your house. However, on the flip side of that, I was just like, how have we not had earth, wind, and fire and water in the game forever? Those are great, right? They feel Minecrafty. They're simplistic. They give you the impression of a landscape or the impression of something, but they don't feel out of place. All of the paintings to me, like Blue Boy and the pig head thing and whatever else is in the paintings, I don't know all the names. The spider, like they always feel so out of place in Minecraft for me. And I like the idea of adding more paintings. I like the idea of having, like, you could hang any of those earth, wind, fire paintings in a medieval city or a modern city. They work just fine. I think that's a sign that they really kind of jive with the Minecraft aesthetic of, like, it's sandboxy and, like, yes, it's a painting and yes, you're specifically putting it down, but you're more matching color and mood to what you're doing, and it's not a specific thing. Like there's a painting of the Wither, I think, that I would never put up anywhere.
Yeah, there's the one that's, I think it's the 4 block wide and 2 block high one that's just a screenshot of Donkey Kong. And yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to put this up in a medieval house. Like, exactly. What is Donkey Kong to these people? So I think it's just, it's a very strange mishmash of stuff that just got added way back in the day. And a lot of them are done by an artist whose name I forget. It's probably on the Minecraft wiki, so if people want to do their research, they can. But a lot of the original canvases for these are like full paintings that are actually quite interesting. Like they in their original form, they feel quite evocative in some ways. And I feel like them being rendered down in pixels still has some of that stuff. But I think it's way more interesting to me to see, this is what that was the entire time. Like the 2 block tall, 1 block wide painting of like a guy standing with a walking stick or something like that is actually part of a larger image, and it was just trimmed down to that one area. And there's a couple of them that have other details that you just don't see because of the conversion to pixels. So it's an interesting field, and it sort of reminds me a bit of how when you make a banner in Minecraft and then you try and put it on a shield, you lose so much of the detail because the shield removes a pixel and tries to squish everything into a smaller space. It's really odd. And so I think people are keeping this painting discussion going right now, and I don't know if the developers have any intent of adding new paintings to the game other than these ones which aren't really in the game as far as survival goes. But I'm curious to see if anything else comes up in that regard.
I'm surprised that they didn't do it with the resource pack overhaul a couple of updates ago. And there's always the programmer art. Like if you want these original paintings, if you've got a soft spot for the Wither painting and then you really want to keep it, you could always just use the programmer art for it. But I'd like them to go forward thematically. Like we've got, earth, wind, fire, and water. What about moon, sun, water, mountains? Like just give us some cool impressionistic kind of basic shapes and colors to play with. And I think that could be a lot of fun. And as you said, like odd number paintings, like 3 wide by 1 tall and 3 by 3, and like that would be awesome.
Christopher Zetterstrand is the artist. So yeah, that's if you want to go to the painting page on the Minecraft wiki, folks, there's some really interesting stuff in there. Before we move on to email, I'm happy that 64-bit seeds are finally in the full Bedrock release, because seed parity means one less thing we have to clarify when talking about Bedrock and Java. The other thing is all of those changes to hunger and regeneration and protection and stuff are going to be very welcome, because when I've been playing Bedrock Edition recently for RTX videos and other stuff, you do need to eat food constantly, especially if you're into the habit of running around and jumping to, move a little bit faster. Your hunger starts depleting more or less straight away. And beyond that, part of the reason the Wither fight was so difficult for a long time on Bedrock is because of the balance between saturation and regeneration and health regen working differently on Bedrock Edition, and the fact that its attacks basically ignored the protection enchantments on your armor. So I'm wondering, going back to Bedrock Edition now, if the Wither fight is going to be a little bit easier for people, or if it's just going to be manageable to begin with for people. Even though its behavior is very different on Bedrock, I think with a little bit of extra protection, the player has a bit more of an edge against the Wither. So crossing our fingers and seeing how well the Wither fight's going to go for Bedrock players from now on.
I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are happy about the parity changes too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Looking at you, Prowl. I think we might need to talk to Prowl at some point about his ongoing vendetta, or I won't say vendetta, that sounds too mean, but like his ongoing quest to have parity between the two versions, and asking Mojang to focus on that. In the meantime, though, let's get into some listener email, shall we?
Sounds like a plan. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And I'll add in a little note here. If you are kind enough to go and leave us a review or a rating on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify or the iTunes Store, that's for a review. It's not for an email. If you do send us a message in that review, we're not going to read it because reviews are read by other people, not us. So don't email the show in the comment section of the iTunes reviews. Email us at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep them short, keep them sweet. Johnny has the first email for us now.
Yes, this one comes in from Skunkitis, which is an itis I'd rather not have, and the subject is lava fishing loot. Hello, Joel and Johnny. I was listening to episode 189 and was intrigued by the idea of lava fishing. What if, while lava fishing, the player could catch a permanent heat source for furnaces and blast furnaces? In my mind, this could be a small mob such as a lizard, think a salamander from some popular fantasy RPGs, or maybe a snake. Once caught, the mob could be placed in a furnace where it would curl up all happy and cozy and power the furnace. If a permanent heat source was too game-breaking, maybe the mob has to be fed after smelting a certain number of items, say a double chest's worth. Other options could be something like packed magma, where the magma block powers the furnace rather than a mob. Either way, this could be a rare find, only obtainable with certain enchantments on the fishing pole, or in the case of a mob, maybe adding bait to fishing. Skunkitis was lost in thought at all the possibilities of a beautiful sandbox game, and had many exciting adventures.
First off, great sign-off. I'm glad that you're just full of thoughts and possibilities in the sandbox game. Second, glad you're alive.
Yes, instead of just dying in the sign-off message most of our correspondents end up doing.
Yeah, although you can be alive like on the other side of the room, Skunkitis. I don't necessarily need you to be like shoulder to shoulder with me. It's a good thing that there's not like smell-o-vision in Minecraft. I love the idea of a mob. Like I think a permanent heat source is likely out of the question.
Yeah, I mean it ends up just making a bunch of the game obsolete at that stage.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if we really need a permanent heat source.
However, I like the idea of creative heat sources in the same way that, you know, the Strider instead of a netherite boat is an interesting addition to the game. I think that, you know, we touched on it earlier, like we kind of already have infinite fuel with bamboo. Like it grows so fast that you really don't have to think about it. If you have enough of it, then you're just going to have full furnaces all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm farming lava now, and it's like there's 100 smelting operations in buckets that refill within 20 minutes. You know, like I think I can make lava faster than I can use lava right now,
which is amazing.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if instead of feeding a little mob, because I like the idea of a mob, compacted magma, it's cool, but like I think a mob would be more fun. And I like the idea of like Minecraft technology being like the Flintstones. You remember any clips from the Flintstones?
Where there's like a bird that's a record player and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the dishwasher is just like the trunk of an elephant or a mammoth that you pull in from the window and like you squeeze it and it washes the dishes for you, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like this would be really fun to have like this little salamander lizard thing that you have you catch it. And then you put it in the furnace and it makes your items, it smelts, whatever. Like maybe it's twice as much as a lava bucket. I don't know. Pick your poison as to how efficient it is. But then when it's done, you have to recharge it instead of feeding it. So you have to reheat it. Maybe it has to be removed from the furnace and given like a bath in lava. And then, or maybe it has to like sit on a magma block for X amount of seconds until it reheats itself. And you could potentially, depending on what the AI is on this mob, have it be removed from a furnace with a hopper when it's done. You could then maybe dispense it into its own little cage where it then, you know, fills up with its heat source and then walks into another hopper and then goes back into the furnace. Or maybe you have to go through and manually move them around. I don't know. But like it's just that kind of stuff I think would just be hilarious. And it's almost too bad that there's not a visual for it. You know, like it's too bad that the mob would just be like a little sprite art inside the furnace rather than, like I said with the Flintstones, that it's not going to be sitting there like a campfire. You know, you can put food on it to cook it. It would be cool if like you could put stuff on the back of this mob, like a giant fire turtle, and it would just kind of sit there and cook things for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I find it very amusing.
You could even use similar sort of animations and stuff to silverfish and endermites right now. If it's this little lizard kind of thing, then it could burrow into furnaces the same way silverfish disappear into stone, and then you just look in the input slot of a furnace and it's just kind of curled up in there. It's a very cute idea. And so it makes me feel very devil's advocate to be like, we don't need any more furnace fuel options. And we've even had some of the more accidental ones removed from Bedrock in the latest update. I do love the idea of fishing up creatures every so often rather than items, though. And so I like the idea of lava fishing and actually pulling something out of the lava like this. Honestly, I'd just be happy to fish a strider out of a lava lake because they never seem to be close enough to the shore for me to, bait them in with a warped fungus. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know if it needs to be applied to the fuel situation because that's sort of trying to solve a problem that had already been more or less solved for us. But there's potential for stuff like this in revising fishing mechanics in future. Sure, I'd be happy with something like that.
Next email comes in from the Deathly Cow. Jukeboxes need love. Hello! After playing through Subnautica Below Zero, and with the release of the latest music-themed snapshot, I was thinking that it's high time that the jukeboxes in Minecraft would be improved. Below Zero has an excellent jukebox system, and I think Minecraft should take some cues from, for example, jukeboxes in Below Zero are automated. Once you find a music disc, it will be uploaded to your data bank and available for you to play on repeat whenever you need without the need for a manual input. In Minecraft, I often find that I will only go out and find a new music disc and play it a couple of times for the novelty. But if I actually wanted to listen to music, I just go to Spotify and play through automatically. Below Zero also allows you to extend the range of jukeboxes by building speakers around your base. And I think Minecraft could use a similar system, maybe using things like echo shards. You could come in from an adventure, perhaps use those to kind of expand the sound around your base. Listen to Pigstep whenever you come home from an adventure. Having the music already playing whenever you enter the base in Below Zero added so much life and charm to what was otherwise a cold and lonely world. The Deathly Cow was eaten by a shadow leviathan whilst vibing to Other Side.
and for folks who haven't played Subnautica, don't look it up. It's scary. So yeah, Subnautica is an interesting world to compare Minecraft to because, for a start, it has the advantage of being high-tech, while Minecraft is low-tech. I mean, we were joking about the Flintstones record player being a bird. That's, as far as we know, that's what happens inside of a jukebox. We don't really know. Whereas, obviously, yeah, Subnautica takes place in, there's spaceships and you're deep-sea diving on an alien world. And it doesn't necessarily change whether or not it's possible for stuff like this to happen in Minecraft, but it does change the way it ends up being implemented. It changes the way Mojang delivers on stuff like that. The vibe has to be different. It has to be low-tech or, at the most, magical. Like enchantment tables, beacons, there's a sort of mystical nature to some of that stuff. So a lot of the stuff that's limiting jukebox automation and that kind of thing, it could be done with hoppers, for example. Like, it's pretty easy to imagine a hopper feeding music discs into the top of a jukebox and just ejecting them when they're done, but it doesn't necessarily work that way if you consider that hoppers usually just pull whatever is in an inventory out of it unless the hopper is locked by redstone. So just putting a hopper underneath the jukebox, you'd imagine it would pull out the disc as soon as the disc was put in there without it even playing in the first place. So there's some aspects of it that make sense if you're looking at it outside of a mechanical perspective and like this is the exact behavior that these components have to have. But when you think about what hoppers normally do and how the jukebox would have to be an exception to that, it starts to fall apart, or at least it starts to look a little bit more difficult than you'd expect.
I saw something recently on Hermitcraft where they've had a data pack or a mod where the disc can be added to the jukebox in that way. Mm-hmm. And it added functionality to me that just reminded me, like, this is why I don't mess with jukeboxes, because like it's a manual thing. The time in versus reward out is just like, okay, I get to listen to this disc, while I'm here. And I think there needs to be something more fun for the players to do with them, and like for them to be enticing, I think, to be used in Minecraft. I agree with you that the below zero comparison, which many people have told me that I should play because I like Minecraft so much. The high tech stuff is a little bit like, I don't want speakers in Minecraft. You know what I mean? But I guess that's essentially what a jukebox is. But I like the idea of being able to, if you were able to use the music discs as your own soundtrack. Like, imagine if you had pressure plates or tripwires, or in the future skulk sensors that heard you coming and then would activate a song of your choice. Like, if you're going to go to your chicken farm, maybe it's going to play one song. And if you're going to go to your more aggressive, like, skeleton spawner where you've got to stand there and swipe at stuff for 5 minutes, then it's going to play you something kind of more upbeat or aggressive, from the Minecraft. Not that those really exist in Minecraft, but you know what I mean? Just having those abilities would be cool, but like for whatever reason, again, first world Minecraft problem, walking over to a jukebox and putting the disc you want to listen to in while you go and swipe at skeletons just seems like too much. It feels like it's like me with voice control with my home assistants. Like the remote control for the TV is right there. I have to pick up the Xbox controller to use the Xbox, yet I still turn it on with my voice because it's cool.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that in Minecraft. I feel that you want it to have that cool factor, and the jukebox for me just doesn't have it.
Yeah, I like the idea of jukeboxes having more automation at some stage. Figuring out how exactly that works is a challenge for the developers. But the one thing that I feel is a redeeming factor of jukeboxes, if you're not interested in just listening to music on them, is the fact that the music discs output different comparator signals from a comparator reading a jukebox. So you can kind of use them as keys if you're going to wire up a redstone circuit and have a specific music disc open a specific door in your base, for example. You could do stuff like that, which I'm planning on doing at some stage in either my current world or other worlds. I just want to be able to build puzzle elements that involve stuff like music discs. I do like the idea of echo shards being involved somehow, but this goes back to what we were saying in the previous emails segment. You need a way to place echo shards in some sort of block form, right? Like amethyst clusters. You'd need a way to have them placed around your base if you were going to use them to like amplify the sound and bridge the sound to other areas of your base. But yeah, it's weird because the jukebox range is either like too much or too little for you when it comes to actually listening to the music. You kind of want to wander off and do something else rather than stick around it, but then it either gets too quiet because you're too far away, or you think, this is like, I'm 50 blocks away from this thing and I can still hear it incredibly clearly, given that it's on the other side of a cave wall or something like that. So maybe some changes to jukeboxes could happen in future.
We have one more email that we're going to throw in the render distance because it's from landscape artist Paulbo Baggins, but we'll talk about that in the post show, so stay tuned.
Yes, and in the meantime, we are going to keep the discussion more or less on the jukebox theme, because we do have a couple more tracks of music added in this most recent snapshot, and we have the Music Disc 5, which I have quite a few feelings about, and I think it's an interesting artifact in itself. I'm still not entirely certain if it's going to be everyone's cup of tea, and I'm not entirely certain if it's going to be everyone's excuse to go to ancient cities. But I think a bit of homework for listeners, for anybody who hasn't already, go and listen to the new 5 music disc, whether in-game in Creative, or you can look it up on Spotify, where the Minecraft soundtracks are all pretty much there. They're all pretty much uploaded there. Maybe listen to Music Disc 11 while you're there, but it's in an interesting twist. The song titled 11 from C418's Minecraft soundtrack that has all of the other music discs in it is not the Music Disc 11 that we hear in-game. So you'll have to either find that in-game or listen to it on YouTube or anywhere you can find the actual music disc sound, because some of those are really interesting. But before we get onto that, what's your experience of music discs in general, Joel? Do you, you've already said you don't really find the jukeboxes that interesting. Do you still bother collecting them just to have the artifacts themselves, or are they just something that passes you by?
No, because I have 14 versions of the same disc. I've never found them that interesting, because you find, oh cool, another music, it's the same one that I already have. I don't find them that interesting, and because of the low functionality of it, I mean, I think I think I knew about the comparator signal from the disc in the jukebox, but again, like if you have to put it in manually, that limits what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And so I just haven't really been bitten by the bug to be the completionist and go and find all of the discs, because like I just, like whenever I find one, it always seems to be the same one. And I know that you can build like a skeleton creeper farm situation where you can farm them, but that's a lot of work just to get them. And then just like, well, you've got them. Now what? Nothing.
Yeah.
Like for me, I want to be specific. There are people I'm sure that love them. And in a lot of ways, when I was listening to music, when I was playing Minecraft early on, I was listening to the soundtrack outside of the game, because I found that the 4 or 5 tracks that were in the game would just repeat, and I wanted to listen to like the 20 or 30 songs that are on the 2 different albums. And so I went out and bought those, and that's how I listened. So for music in Minecraft, for me, especially as a content creator, has always been outside the game, because then you're not, even if you're listening, you're not recording it in that way. So that is cool. Although I have to say, I like the new tracks, and I have to remember when new releases come out to turn on the in-game music for like a couple streams, just to kind of like get the vibe and kind of like get the experience and stuff. Because I didn't do that for Caves and Cliffs, and I should have. Yeah. So for me, the music discs just haven't been a big thing. And to go to your point against Music Disc 11 and this new 5, soundscape experience, while I appreciate the technical feat and the expression behind it all, not really my thing. I'd rather listen to like a song. The soundscape stuff to me just ends up being distracting from what I'm doing in game, and in some cases, depending on how it's composed and what's going on, it's like nails in a chalkboard for me. Like I kind of have to turn it off, because I tried to listen to 5. I got 30 seconds into it to kind of get the gist, and then I was like, nah, I can't listen to this right now.
No, that's fair. I mean, next question: have you ever played BioShock, the first one, the one that takes place in the underwater city of Rapture?
No,
because I think the use of these discs as soundscapes, and like, in both 5 and 11, the broken music disc that's already in the game, you hear ambience and stuff, but you hear some in-game sound effects, a few real-world sounds, which are typically stuff like heavy breathing and, grunts of effort. There's a little bit of like objects rattling around and stuff like that. Occasional haunting music, and then some additional sound effects that aren't necessarily part of the game or are heavily modified from Minecraft's gameplay that add sort of mystery and horror elements to it. And I sort of think of these music discs in a similar way to the audio logs that you pick up as you're exploring the game in BioShock. You get these dictaphone logs that you play on like a little tape recorder, and it just kind of like winds up, and then you hear somebody telling a story about how, the system screwed them over and they've moved to this underwater city to escape. And this is effectively Minecraft's way of doing that, or at least my interpretation of it, is that it's Minecraft's way of doing that in a game that doesn't have any text and doesn't have any speech. At most the villagers go "ha" at you, and that's what speech is. So in order to convey any kind of history through a recording of some kind, without there really being any text beyond the end poem and the names of blocks and items in your inventory, you have to do it through stuff like music discs and soundscapes and that like level of ambience. And so it's an interesting use of music discs when a lot of them are just literally music, and you see the word music disc and you kind of think, well, that's not really what discs like 11 and 5 are. They're more like audio logs to me, and there's just a couple of implications there, like, who is recording this in the first place? How are they recording it? Why are they recording it? You can go down a bit of a rabbit hole, which is why I kind of have a bit of a fascination with this, even though I'm not normally one to speculate about the lore of Minecraft. This has been kind of in the conversation amongst players for a little while. To take us down a history rabbit hole here for a second, the 11 music disc was added around the same time that the Wither was added. It was added in like a 0.4 release after the Wither was added in the Pretty Scary update in 1.4.2, I guess. And before that, you could here, the music discs in game, you could get them from a skeleton killing a creeper as of the 1.1 release, but you couldn't get disc 11 at all, and it was only added like a couple of major updates later, which was a relatively short amount of time in those days because Minecraft updates were coming out quite frequently. But I think it's interesting that this disc was kind of like held back for a while, and by that point, the Herobrine hoax had happened, in which a player tried to convince everyone that there was a ghostly version of Steve with completely white eyes, quote-unquote, haunting their game. And it's never been publicly stated that the disc has any connection to that. I'm pretty sure it hasn't. But since that was the prevailing horror story about Minecraft, people have kind of made the connection and imagined that the sounds of this person heavily breathing and running, and it sounds like they're kind of clicking some items together, leafing through a few pages of a book, and then they break off at a run again. You hear a few dirt blocks being placed, and then there's this distorted noise that sounds really alarming because it's not like anything you've heard in Minecraft or in real life. And then it just kind of cuts off abruptly and leaves you with static. That's disc 11. And I think it's very strange that the song titled 11 on Minecraft Volume Beta plays an entirely different composition, and you sort of wonder, is this disc broken because somebody tried to like record over it? Is the broken pieces of this just what comes out of the jukebox? And was that disc initially meant to be music and then, it's just been shattered, but it somehow still plays? There's a lot of weird questions that stuff like that brings up. So I think for lore hounds, for people who are really into this kind of deep diving the intentions behind it, I think discs like this create a lot of mystery and they leave a lot of questions, kind of similar to what they're trying to do with structures in Minecraft and ancient cities, and the idea that there is civilization in the past of Minecraft that we no longer get access to, but we can still hear or see the remnants of.
I wonder if it's just because I'm a visual artist, and while I used to play instruments, and I call myself musically inclined, I'm not like a big music buff. I'm not a musician as an adult by any stretch. And I wonder if I get a lot more lore mystery vibes and satisfaction from things like the ancient cities than I do from the music discs.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's just like different strokes for different folks, like just depending on what you're into and what medium speaks to you in terms of how you think about lore, whether the music discs are either more appealing or more important to you in terms of your Minecraft experience, depending on what your real world experience is that you're bringing to the game.
And the thing is, a lot of the music disc stuff is just entirely optional, right? It's a mechanic you have to more or less choose to engage with, whereas exploring things and seeing structures isn't really something you can't like avert your eyes before you see a desert temple. You know, it's just there. So yeah, it very much feels like an optional, like, let's go slightly deeper into this, in the same way that collecting all of the audio logs and listening to all of that stuff does to get you the backstory in BioShock. When this music disc 5 launched, I wasn't all that interested in it initially myself, because it just seemed like, okay, they're adding another music disc. It's probably a soundscape, considering Lena Raine wasn't involved in the composition. It was a Samuel Ahlberg joint. I assume because he's the lead sound designer, it's going to be more of like another take on stuff like this. But listening to this and comparing it to the 11 disc, I think this disc has more use of current Minecraft sound effects than the previous one does. Like when you're hearing the player's footsteps, but they're Minecraft in-game footsteps. The only thing I think that you hear that is a real-world sound effect is, again, like the heavy breathing, and the rest of it all seems to be compiled from Minecraft sound effects. And it seems a little bit more evident what is happening in this one compared to 11, because in 11, you sort of hear this distorted noise at the end. You don't really know what it means. In the 5 music disc, it seems much more linked to ancient cities. You hear the warden's heartbeat. You hear the warden's roar. You hear a skulk sensor being tripped at one point, and that's like the end of the disc. Like a roar happens immediately afterwards, and then it just kind of distorts and turns into static. So, I think if anything, the soundscape of Minecraft has developed to the point where a lot more of these sound effects can be recognizable in the first place. And if nothing else, that's just a credit to the sound design team that they're able to put together a soundscape that now feels inherently Minecraft, as opposed to just having, the sound of somebody placing a block in it. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But beyond that, yeah, it's interesting to see what people will think of this. I have a concern about this disc in particular, which is that it feels like the player searching for an ancient city, finding it, running into the warden, right? But it's sort of like the recovery compass, where you can't really have the feeling of listening to this disc and being scared of what you're hearing, like the dread if you've never seen an ancient city before and you're listening to this disc, because you have to go to the ancient cities to find it. And so if you have to visit one to find this, then the impact of it being, ghostly noises, the sound of a skulk sensor tripping, I imagine if you'd heard that and you didn't know anything else about the Deep Dark, but then you go out into the wild and the first time you hear a skulk sensor noise, it would be terrifying. But you have to have found the ancient city in order to find it, unless you're on a multiplayer server and somebody else just gives you the disc. So I have a feeling that it changes the context of the record in that way, and instead of invoking dread for players who've never seen an ancient city before, you've already been there, you've already gone through the struggle. I feel like if you're listening to this disc and you hear a skulk sensor trip and you hear this roar, what you're feeling then is sympathy and not fear, because you're like, oh yeah, you as well. It kind of leads to this sort of relatable experience being conveyed by this disc instead of a horror experience, which makes it interesting. And I'm not sure how I feel about the mechanic of finding it in ancient cities as a result. And so yeah, I presume if you're not that into music discs, are you gonna bother searching? If you're in an ancient city and you find the disc fragments, are you gonna bother taking them with you?
I mean, I'll probably take them just to say that I've got them, rather than having to go back to an ancient city to get them again. Mm-hmm. From the few videos that I've seen, the loot tables right now, you can get all of them by one visit to this ancient city. Not like you have to find several ancient cities to find them, which I feel is a little bit strange. For me, it's more like what you said. I think putting the recovery compass and the not the recovery compass itself, but the echo shards and the music fragment discs in the ancient cities, it's not where they should be. They should be in dungeon loot, or they should be in, places that you're going to get to just before you go to the Deep Dark, so that, we often talk about cues in Minecraft indicating like what you're supposed to do. Good example is like now we've got ruined nether portals around the overworld, so kind of hinting at like, hey, if you complete this, it's kind of a hint as to what you might want to do to get to the nether. And I feel like how to approach the ancient cities for a Minecraft player that maybe hasn't watched YouTube, I feel like having an audio disc that is like it has, I believe it has the same coloring as like Skulk, like it looks like it has like a turquoisey black look to it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that, listening to that, and then as you said, hearing the different noises and the experience of like walking on wool and the roar of the warden, I think that it would then, I prefer the fear reaction. Like I think, oh wow, that sounds creepy and strange. And then when you are mining and you hear the skulk react, then you kind of freeze and go, wait a minute, I've heard that before. That's not good, or I don't think it's good. I don't know what to expect. And I think it's a better mechanic to kind of like lead the players towards what they can expect when they go to the Deep Dark. Whereas with it being a reward for going to the Deep Dark, it's just like, okay, well, now I just have a recording of basically what I just experienced, which why would I want to sit and listen to that? Like, I think that it has way more potential as a instructional tool, as a hint, than it does, like you said, as a, you've already been here, here's a memento.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like they having gone down the route of stuff like ruined nether portals giving you hints at stuff. The hints are retroactive now. They're more they're more like keepsakes than anything. One last thing before we get on to just the other soundtrack stuff, because I still want to talk about Lena Raine's Wild Update tracks. I think the missing link with the music discs is there's a track on Minecraft Volume Alpha by C418 which is just called Death, which follows the same pattern as discs that have more kind of ambience in them, like 11 and 5. Death doesn't appear in game anywhere. It doesn't play as part of the Minecraft soundtrack. I'm pretty sure it's not, really in the game's code. But some faint kind of Minecrafty music plays in the background, and in the foreground you hear sound effects of a chicken clucking. There's a player kind of sneaking around. Presumably you kind of hear like clothes rustling together and stuff. and then there is a swish, which I think is the old bow sound effect. There's a sudden kind of "pagak" from the chicken, and a very uncomfortably squishy sound, as though the chicken is being like skinned or cut open. And then the very Minecraft pop noise of a player picking up an item. And I always assumed that was like the implication that I've had is that this was a player's first time hunting and killing an animal. And the title, Death, just seems very overly dramatic for a player killing a chicken, and obviously the chicken squawk noise is like Comedy 101. But it's also really impactful if you think of it as basically the first death a player actively caused. You know, considering how few of us are used to killing to eat in modern society, just how gross the sound effect is after the chicken dies, and it's like, oh, clearly this player is trying to get the usable bits of this chicken. Yeah, it's it's a little bit creepy. But again, it doesn't appear in the game anywhere. That's not another music disc, and I assume they didn't want to load in too many of the creepy sides of this with, you know, the game being a sandbox and, you know, players making what they want out of the experience. And ultimately, players might have a very different vision of the story of their own Minecraft world. It's up to them whether these music discs kind of fit with their story. But as far as, yeah, people talk about the Warden making Minecraft into a horror game, I feel like there's been horror elements of this kind of from the start. You just have to dig a little bit deeper to find them.
Yeah, I remember distinctly the chicken noise, because it always pulls me out of the music whenever I'm listening to it. It's like, oh, right, it's this track, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember this. I usually go and skip it because, like, again, the sounds are uncomfortable. I do like the idea of squeezing a chicken to have that noise. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a funny. It's too bad that you can't, like, especially for people that are animal lovers that don't want to go around and like kill Minecraft animals to eat. They'd rather eat vegetables and golden carrots and stuff. Like, it's too bad that you can't pick up a chicken and like squeeze it and make the cluck noise and maybe poop out an egg, you know?
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Like, you can't, I don't think you can pet animals like in a way that would be like, if you go to touch a cow, you punch it rather than pet it.
I mean, you can feed them. That's basically like all you can do.
But it would be cool if you could have that interaction with like the dogs, the cats, the cows. Like, if you wanted to pet the pig and the pig kind of gave you like a happy oink as opposed to the unhappy oink they make when you use the axe. Like, I feel like that could be kind of a fun way to have more sound interaction in the game compared to discs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to just a brief chat about the new music, though, because rounding this off on as a slightly less horrific note, I think some of the new music is fantastic. I've listened to Firebug and I've listened to Ares so far. So there's one more track that I have to listen to. Labyrinthine is the only one that I don't think I've listened to yet, but I really like the first two. I think those are really fun, and having Firebugs play in like a mangrove swamp would be like really good ambience, I think.
And Firebugs has quite a lot of layers to it. Like, it's pleasant, and then it's like a little bit off kilter in a good way. Like, lost in a swamp or surrounded by jungle. Like, it's pleasant, but you're also like, I can't really see where I'm going, so it's a little bit uneasy. And I liked it. And it goes to a different place near the end too. Like, it gets brighter and louder, where I thought it was going to keep the same mood. I find that the new Minecraft music has a little bit more of a story within the song to it compared to the other tracks that tend to just have the same mood from start to finish. Like, there's no arc.
Yeah,
you know?
Lena Raine's music is way more optimistic and driven is the two words I'd kind of describe. And and it's not necessarily all like major key, happy-go-lucky kind of music, but in contrast with C418, where a lot of his work is sort of more melancholy and ambient, and you know, it kind of gives you the feeling of like, oh, you're alone in this world, and a lot of that stuff feels very emotional. I think the emotion in Lena Raine's music is very, very optimistic. There's still a sense of open space in it, especially in Firebugs, because it starts out with a lot of pauses, and a few of the Caves and Cliffs tracks are like that as well. There's just like a piano chord that she lets sit for a few seconds before the next chord comes in. There's a lot of pauses, but then everything builds a lot more. There's like percussion that kicks in later, and it feels a lot more like something that you're just kind of nodding along to than just it being kind of melancholy piano the whole time. Obviously, C418's repertoire expands enormously when you look at some of the other music discs, but that's really where a bit of more of like the diversity of composition starts to come in.
Yeah, and I felt like the percussion is where I felt like Firebugs really changed, but it didn't change to the point where it didn't feel like the same track or didn't feel out of place. It just kind of, oh, okay, this is different, as if like you've spent time in this swamp, now you know your way around, and now as you're walking through your very familiar swamp, you're like, tapping on logs as you go by, like in that, like the percussion kind of felt like hollow logs, or like the impression of that kind of a familiarity with an environment, which I thought was really cool. I really liked Ares as well. I thought that was pretty chill compared to Firebugs. You may fall asleep if you're playing late. It has a lullaby kind of feel to it, sunsetty, like kind of like late evening dusk sort of deal, and reminded me more of Minecraft music that I'm more familiar with. I did listen to Labyrinthine. It is good, they're all good, but I felt it was a bit different than other Minecraft music, and I'm less steeped in all the tracks. It's been a while since I've sat down and listened to them all to be, super familiar with them. But it felt more modern in terms of like modern game music. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that I noticed the difference. That's all.
Yeah. And I think there's some interesting contrast in the stuff that Lena Raine composed for the Nether update and then Pigstep. But that's why Pigstep was the music disc, because it felt like a departure. So it's kind of interesting to see a bit more of like a stylistic mix in newer additions to the soundtrack. I think that's where we'll wrap up for today. If anyone else has some interesting input that they want to, send us via email about the soundtrack to Minecraft, or whether you've got theories about the 5 music disc, or if you're just into whatever the new stuff is, please let us know. Be happy to hear from you about this. But that's where we're going to leave the show for today. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in. You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. That will get you joined in our community, and you can pledge at any level to get an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, participating in things like the live show recording, and the monthly Minecraft audio hangout is only a few steps away. We're currently at 343 patrons. There's always room for more, of course, and special thanks go out to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance and tell them that they should listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Really, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find the Spawn Chunks. Be sure to leave a rating on the iTunes Store or the Spotify platform. And again, make sure to leave a review, not an email, because we won't get it. You can email the show specifically for those reasons at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Reminder to keep those short and sweet. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is where you can find the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where I try to make sense of this bizarre and wonderful game in Season 2 of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I am up to online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can listen to my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment at thecitadelcafe.com. And Brockett and I talked about the video games that we grew up with this past week, so that's going to be a fun conversation to get out later on. I haven't yet edited and published that show, but that's coming later on this week. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with a special nod to this Friday, where I'll be streaming on my birthday.
Happy birthday for then. Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and that's on the record.